And welcome back to the cross-examination in court of the nurse Lucy Letby. Just as a reminder before we start today, Lucy Letby is currently standing trial accused of the murder of 7 babies and the attempted murder of 10 others at the Countess of Chester Hospital's neonatal unit. She has pled not guilty to all charges. Mr. Johnson asks Letby about an ET tube document which she had entered at 6:10 a.m. on February 17, 2016. Child K desaturated at 6:15 a.m. Letby says she has no memory of being at Child K's cot side. Letby agrees Child K had been on morphine and would have been well sedated. Nicholas Johnson: and yet the tube slipped again at 6:15 a.m. just after you had been with her. Letby responds, I can't say that I was physically with her. No. Letby says the notes she would have obtained for Child K were at the end of the bed, and she has no recollection of being physically with Child K at the cot side. Mr. Johnson asks about the 7:25 to 7:30 a.m. desaturation. Letby says she has no memory of it. Letby says she cannot recall any intervention regarding Child K at that point. Mr. Johnson says one of Letby's colleagues was called to the nursery. Nicholas Johnson: what were you doing in nursery room 1 at 7:30 a.m? Letby replies, I can't answer that. I don't have any recollection of it. The neonatal review is shown for February 17, 2016. Letby's duties include tending to her designated baby in room 2 at 7 a.m. Mr. Johnson says there was no reason for Letby to be in room 1 at 7:30. Letby replies, there can be many reasons. Mr. Johnson says Letby was sabotaging Child K yet again, weren't you? Letby replies, no. Letby says she cannot say if Child K moved her ET tube more than once. Quote, I don't have independent memory of the tube slipping. Letby is asked to look at her police interviews for Child K. Within there, Letby said she had believed Child K's tube had slipped at an earlier point. Letby denies dislodging Child K's tube. Asked if she disputes her colleague's recollection of Child K's desaturation, Letby says she cannot recall. Mr. Johnson moves to the 3:50 a.m. desaturation, the first of 3 desaturations for Child K. Letby agrees Joanne Williams was Child K's designated nurse. She agrees Joanne Williams left Child K before the 3:50 a.m. desaturation. She accepts that nurse left at 3:47 a.m. Letby says she cannot recall Dr. Ravi Jairam's whereabouts at this point. A note from the transport team at 3:41 a.m. is shown to the court. Quote, called Dr. Jairam back with the above plan and he was agreeable totally with all the above. Letby accepts that if this note is accurate, Dr. Jairam would have been around the nursing station at this time. Letby accepts that Joanne Williams would have asked someone to babysit Child K in her temporary absence from the nursery. Asked if she disputes it was her to babysit Child K, she replied, quote, I have no memory of that. Letby says she has no memory of Dr. Ravi Jairam's account of him walking into the unit and seeing her standing over Child K's cot side, or that Child K was desaturating, or that Child K's ET tube was displaced. Letby denies trying to kill Child K. Lucy Letby is shown a copy of her 2019 police interview, specifically police talking through Dr. Ravi Jairam's account of events from that night. That was the evidence he had given in the trial, that he had felt uncomfortable with Letby being in nursery room 1 and entered and saw Letby. Letby in police interview said she didn't remember the event. Mr. Johnson suggests Letby is lying. Letby denies this. Letby denied in police interview dislodging the tube. Mr. Johnson says Letby had earlier said the event, quote, didn't happen. Letby replies, I don't believe it did happen, but I have no direct memory of it. Letby tells the court it was standard practice at the Countess of Chester Hospital's neonatal unit to wait a few seconds, 10 to 20, to see if a baby self-corrected during a desaturation. Nicholas Johnson: 30 seconds? Letby replies, I can't say. You are lying, aren't you? No. Because you were trying to kill Child K. No. The nursing notes for Joanne Williams recorded, quote, large amount blood-stained oral secretions for child K. Letby says she did not believe she gave Joanne Williams that information. Nicholas Johnson: did you ever see child K's parents? Letby replies, I can't recall. Did you ever meet them? I can't recall. Then why did you search for them on Facebook on April the 20th, 2018? Letby replies, because I have thought of the babies on the unit over the years, and I do look back at them. You have a very good memory for names. Letby replies, yes. Her name didn't appear on the handover sheet, did it? Letby responds, I can't say. Mr. Johnson says child K had been born earlier that day and handed over to the care of Melanie Taylor, and child K was transferred out of the hospital. Nicholas Johnson: how can you remember that name of child K? Letby: I can't. Nicholas Johnson: can't or won't? Letby: I can't. What was the significance of April the 20th, 2018? Letby replies, I can't recall. Do you remember the answer you gave to your counsel on May the 16th? Letby responds, no. Mr. Johnson says Letby said you look back on all the babies you care for. Letby says it was taken out of context and she played a part in child K's care via the morphine infusion. Mr. Johnson moves on to the case of child F, the first of the two babies the prosecution say Letby poisoned with insulin. Child L is the other child allegedly poisoned by Letby. Mr. Johnson previously told the court the cases of child F and L would be part of the cross-examination process together. Letby accepts the insulin readings which were shown for child F, the insulin and insulin C-peptide numbers. The jury have heard the blood sample showed an extremely high level of insulin and a very low C-peptide level in child F, which a medical expert said only had one explanation, that being that the child received insulin from some outside source. Letby tells Mr. Johnson that she accepts the insulin and C-peptide levels detected in the blood of child F. Mr. Johnson asks if Miss Letby agrees that someone targeted child F and injected insulin into his feed bag. She says, quote, she can't answer that, but says, I accept that he was given insulin at some point, yes. The nursing staff rota for August 4th to 5th is shown to the court. Child F is in room 2 with Letby's colleague, the designated nurse. Letby was designated nurse for another baby. Letby says she cannot say how the insulin got in child F, so, quote, I don't think I can answer if staffing levels played a part in the poisoning of child F. Mr. Johnson says Letby was very keen to ask police about the TPN bag said to have had insulin in it. Letby replies, because I was being accused of placing insulin in the bag. I thought someone would have checked the fluids. I wanted them to check the bag, yes. I thought it would have been standard practice on the unit. Mr. Johnson says Letby had not been questioned about child F and child L in 2018, but was questioned about it in the following interviews. In it, Letby asked police about the nutrition bag said to have had insulin in. Nicholas Johnson: you knew very well the bags wouldn't have been kept, didn't you? Letby replies, no. Letby had said to police if there had been concerns over the bags, they would have been kept. Nicholas Johnson: you knew no concern had been expressed, didn't you? Letby replies, I didn't know no concern had been expressed at the time of this interview, no. Police had asked why Letby had asked about the nutrition bags. Letby had said to police there may, quote, have been an issue with something else. Letby tells the court the issue may have been insulin coming from outside the unit. She says at that point it was not known where the insulin had come from, and it was not known if it was in the bags. Letby says she does not recall there were concerns for child F's blood sugar level in her police interview in 2019. Mr. Johnson, however, says she was aware of it at the time. Text messages are shown to the court with Letby messaging a colleague about a low blood sugar reading. Nicholas Johnson: had you seen something like this before? Babies having loads of dextrose and still having low blood sugars? Letby replies, yes. Nicholas Johnson: you were trying to place it as natural causes. Letby replies, I don't think I was trying to provide an explanation. Letby's message is shown to the court. Wonder if he has an endocrine problem then? Mr. Johnson asks, does that mean natural causes? Letby replies, yes. Mr. Johnson asks about the security of nutrition bags in the fridge under lock and key. He says they are not safe from someone with a key who can inject a tiny amount of insulin into the bag. Letby replies, the bags are sealed and you would have to break the seal to do that. Mr. Johnson asks if that would prevent someone from the previous shift from inserting insulin into the bag. Letby replies, I can't say that as I wouldn't put insulin into a TPN bag. Mr. Johnson says the prescribed bag must have been tampered with between 4 p.m. on August the 4th and 1 a.m. on August 5th. The replacement bag was a generic one. Mr. Johnson describes how the insulin could be administered after the bag has been delivered to the ward. One method is after the cellophane wrap has been removed, to which he says that would mean there would be very few candidates who could have done that. Nicholas Johnson. Why would you not put insulin into bags? Letby. Because that would go against all standard practice. It is highly dangerous. Letby replies, yes. Life-threatening to a child. Letby replies, yes. Something that would never cross the minds of medical staff. Lucy Letby. At the time, no. Letby says she cannot answer if Child F was deliberately poisoned, as she does not know how the insulin got there, who was there, or why. Mr. Johnson asks about the Facebook searches for Child E and F's mother, carried out in the months after August 4th, 2015. Letby says she got on well with the mother at the time, that she thought about Child E often and wanted to see how Child F was doing. Mr. Johnson moves to the second insulin case for Child L, who was a twin to Child M. Letby's defence statement said she had done nothing wrong and had not deliberately harmed either twin. Letby said in her defence statement the unit was exceptionally busy on April 9th, 2016, the day after Child L and Child M had been born. Letby said at the time she could not understand Child L's insulin levels and could not understand why there was not an investigation done at the time. Letby denies using the hypoglycemic pathway not being followed as an opportunity to attack Child L. Letby says she accepts someone put insulin into the dextrose solution for Child L and accepts there would be no reason for doing this and it would be, quote, highly dangerous. Letby accepts the blood results prove insulin was placed in the dextrose solution. Professor Hindmarsh had previously given evidence to say insulin had been administered between midnight and 9:30 a.m. on April 9th. Nicholas Johnson, do you accept that? Letby replies, yes. Mr. Johnson says the insulin administered to Child L was a, quote, targeted attack, as the dextrose bag had been in place since noon on April 8th. Quote, it follows that insulin was administered while the dextrose bag was hanging, doesn't it? Letby responds, I don't know. Mr. Johnson talked through the process and repeats that, from evidence, the bag must have been in place when insulin was administered. Letby replies, if that's what the expert suggests, yes. Nicholas Johnson, it follows that it was a targeted attack. Letby replies, I can't answer that. Mr. Johnson says the only two staff members on duty for both days when Child F and Child L were poisoned with insulin were Letby and Belinda Simcock. A staffing rota for the April 9th day shift is shown to the court. Child L and Child M are in room 1 with designated nurse Mary Griffith. Letby is designated nurse for 2 other babies in room 1. Belinda Simcock is the designated nurse for 3 babies in room 3. 4 babies are in room 2 and 4 babies are in room 4. The neonatal schedule for April 9th is shown. Mr. Johnson says it is to show what Lucy Letby was doing between 9 and 9:30 a.m. The schedule shows Letby was a co-signer for medication for 1 baby in room 2 and giving a feed to her designated baby in room 1. Letby was the co-signer for medication for a room 1 designated baby at around 9:10 a.m. Mr. Johnson says a series of prescriptions for 3 different babies at 9:25 to 9:20 a.m, co-signed by a nursery nurse and Mary Griffith, gave Letby the opportunity to administer the insulin for Child L. Letby replies, no, I don't know how the insulin got there. Mr. Johnson says it has already been established that insulin was administered on the unit, on the bag that was connected to Child L throughout that time. Nicholas Johnson. This was a targeted attack, wasn't it? Letby pauses. What do you say? Letby replies, not by me it wasn't. Letby says she can only answer for herself in relation to the accusation by Mr. Johnson that the insulin poisoning for child F and child L can only be you or Belinda Simcock. Mr. Johnson says despite the fact the bag was changed at noon on April 9th, the insulin kept being administered to child L. Letby replies, yes. Mr. Johnson says we know that because the blood sample taken to the lab was taken at 3:45 p.m. and contained insulin. Letby replies, I can't recall. Mr. Johnson says child L was targeted with a second bag of insulin. Letby responds, I'd have to be guided by the evidence, the expert evidence. Mr. Johnson says a third bag is hung up at 4:30 p.m. The hypoglycemia continued, and Letby agrees. The fourth bag, hung up the following day, when you, Letby, were not working, was put up, and the hypoglycemia gradually resolved. Letby agrees. Mr. Johnson says the reason for the hypoglycemia was that someone had poisoned child L through at least 2 bags of insulin. Letby responds, yes, Nicholas Johnson. And that was you, wasn't it? Letby replies, no.